How's it going, everyone? It's August 1 Today is January 13th, 2021, and today we're going to focus on the major United States snowstorm that's expected to happen headed into this weekend. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content, and make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather-related content. So let's begin by first taking a look at the European model, which as of right now, which is a shift from yesterday's forecast. The European is now taking a little bit of a stronger storm along the northeast coast than the GFS model, where the European model is now at 988 millibars, which is slightly stronger and a little bit closer to the coast than the GFS model, which is at 991 millibars. So what this means is that the European is more likely to bring a more major snow event to the northeast. And however, it seems like both of the computer models, for the most part, are fairly close in terms of their position. So I don't expect major drastic changes in terms of where this will exactly go. We're still 4 days out. There's still a lot that could change, especially the specific details. But in terms of where exactly this will go, the most likely scenario at this point is that this will affect mainly the interior northeast as well as obviously the Midwest. But in terms of northeast, the areas that should be watching the most is mainly in the interior northeast. It seems less likely that the cities closer to the coast, like Boston or New York City, could get more involved because this storm is going to form very well way too far up north to really bring a lot of that snow further south to New York City or Boston. And low pressure is going to be fairly is going to be too close to the coast to really bring much of any snow, since there's going to be a lot of warm air filtering in as a result of all the convergent energy that's going to be really close to the coast of the northeast. So this will mainly be an interior northeast threat as a result, where the most snow is likely to occur. So like I said in my previous video, the thing that will determine how much snow you'll get in this region is how strong the storm will be and its exact position. And it also depends on timing, because if this storm maybe forms a little bit earlier to where it forms a little bit more southward, that means that it has this entire area of the northeast to dump snow on before it moves northward along with the jet stream. And you see that there's a lot that however, in a scenario where there's going to be a little bit more, where the low pressure is going to form a little bit more northerly, then it's less likely you guys are going to experience the most potential snow from this, since obviously by the time this low pressure forms, it won't have a lot of time to dump a lot of snow all throughout the northeast, which is why if this storm forms a little bit later in the run, that means less snow is less likely. So what could change the timing and the position of this storm that could maybe dump a little bit more snow for the northeast or a little bit less? So, and it really all depends on how strong this polar vortex is, because if it's a little bit stronger, that means the unstable air along the east coast will be stronger, and that will induce a lot more convection, and a lot more convection earlier in the time frame to develop this low pressure system well further south. And this low pressure system you see in the Great Lakes will eventually converge with this newly formed low pressure system that's expected to form currently off the east coast. And that will mean that not only the storm will be stronger thanks to increase in stability, but it will form further southward to where it's going to have a lot more time to dump snow all throughout the northeast, especially the more interior portions. However, it seems like both the computer models are developing this storm relatively late, because this low pressure system relatively late, to the point where not as much snow as, let's say, yesterday is expected, where the GFS expects this low pressure system to form right around the 90-hour mark and right around New England. And by that point, it's going to be well up north to maybe have a lot more time to dump snow in the Northeast, which is expected to limit the snowfall. And the European is also agreeing with this for the most part. However, it is a little bit stronger, so you might experience a little bit more snow than the GFS model. However, it's still forming that low pressure system very late and very far up north to the point where it's not going to dump as much snow. But we just have to wait and see how strong this polar vortex is, and what will determine that is also the northwest winds. How strong will they be? How potent will they be? Because those winds will be the key in driving that Arctic air further southward to create that polar vortex all throughout the eastern half of the United States, which would make a stronger storm in the Northeast. So at this point, we have to wait and see. But what I could say with confidence is that most of the Northeast will experience snow from this. I'll say most of the interior Northeast to be more specific, and um and I would say over an inch or two of snow is like forecasted at this point, and there are some areas where it could eh, see even more than that, especially in the higher elevations. So we need to keep that in mind. In terms of the current forecast for the Northeast, you obviously see in I expect in the highest elevations 6 to 12 inches are possible, and then in the slightly lower elevations and in the areas further southeastward, I expect a little less, around 3 to 6 inches or 1 to 3 inches, which is typical when we're seeing a low pressure this close to the coast that's filtering a lot of warm air in. So it isn't entirely untypical, but it could still be a major snowfall event for the interior Northeast. And I want you guys in the Northeast to, I would say, prepare now in the interior Northeast. While it's still uncertain that this much snow will fall, it could be less or it could be even more. I would say it's likely you guys will experience a snowstorm, so I would just get ready at this point. Now, let's move on to the Midwest, where in my Midwest forecast, you see that I'm expecting a large area of 1 to 3 inches. This extends through the Dakotas, this extends to Omaha, Nebraska, this extends to Des Moines, Iowa, Chicago, and Detroit, and even more Midwest cities and around and just north of the Ohio River Valley should receive 1 to 3 inches of snow, as it's going to be a fairly expansive snow that's going to dump snow over a large area. It isn't going to be very major for the most part, but in some areas it definitely could be major, because you're seeing in my forecast map, I'm expecting 6 to 12 inches right around the eastern half of Minnesota and the northwestern half of Wisconsin. And this, I would say, the snowfall forecast you see for the Midwest and the Great Lakes region is definitely more certain at this point, because it isn't what it isn't going to be one of those scenarios from the Midwest where the the forecast models are depending on a new low pressure system to form, which takes a lot more on which is you typically a lot more uncertain when we're talking about a low pressure a forecast model that's expecting a new low pressure system to form, especially for 4 days out. However, for the Great Lakes, the event is only around 3 days out and as early as 2 days out in some areas in Dakota. So there's a lot more confidence there, and it's pretty much guaranteed that a low pressure will move through the Midwest and at least dump a good amount of snow through the Midwest. So the snowfall forecast seems fairly accurate, I would say, at this point. There could definitely be changes because, like I said, 3 days, that's still a lot of time for the forecast to change. A good example I'd like to bring up is that 3 days before Irma actually hit Florida, it was expected to make landfall in the eastern half, but literally 3 days after, it went the completely other side of Florida. And while it isn't a ton of a miles of a difference, it isn't a ton of miles. That there is it isn't really a big difference in terms of miles. However, it's when it comes to weather, any shift within only several miles can make a major difference in what you experience. So the exact details are still unknown, but I expect around this amount all throughout the Midwest. And and just stay tuned for your local forecast. In terms of what the GFS model is saying, let's take a look at the GFS model, and you see that the low pressure is moving through Canada. It's moving through the eastern half. This should be where the low pressure would be at around a day from now, around the 14th, and then it continues to move, and weirdly enough, it continues to strengthen, and it's as a result of the increase in stability a little bit that's going to be induced this this polar vortex dropping through. And this polar vortex is going to drop through the United States as a result of the pressure gradient between this ridge in the Pacific Northwest and this low pressure system. And that wind is going to bring a lot of Arctic air further south. And that will be the anatomy of this low pressure system in the East Coast, and also the colder than average temperatures you guys will see in the United States this week. And you see that by the time it reaches Minnesota and Wisconsin, it's going to be a fairly strong storm. And well, I wouldn't say extremely strong, but it's going to be decently strong to dump a good amount of snow throughout Minnesota. Let me show you guys the forecasted radar map from the GFS to show you guys how big that snow swath will be. And you're going to see that the snow swath will be a little bit you see that the snow swath will extend through Minnesota, it's going to extend through Wisconsin, and it's going to extend through Canada. And you see that it's a pretty big snow swath, and we're seeing bands of heavier snow throughout the Midwest and the Great Lakes region. So keep that in mind, and it's going to be big enough, and it's going to move slow enough to dump maybe up to 6 to 8 inches of snow in some areas, especially if you're closer along Great Lakes. So keep that in mind when it comes to your forecast headed into this weekend. And also the temperatures will be much lower than average throughout the United States, so you guys need to keep that in mind as well. And you see that there's a lot of, and based off of Futurecast radar, there's going to be an extending band of snow all throughout the Great Lakes region. So keep that in mind throughout the Great Lakes, as it could be a major snow event for you guys if all the right factors play out, and if this low pressure system forms just early enough, and if it forms just strong enough, and it comes into the northeast coast at the right angle, you could see up to a foot of snow in some areas in the northeast. So I would say prepare throughout the northeast and also the upper Great Lakes region as well. But anyways, guys, I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content. Make sure to like if you like this video. And I hope you guys have a good day, a good night, a good morning, whenever you're watching this.